So before I was studying AI in biotech, but since about 2 years ago, I got interested in AI and religion, specifically how religious organizations are developing AI, what they're doing with it, and then specifically my case is in Catholic AI. So I'll be sharing some of the things I've learned from now. So these are all emergent insights, and then just share some things that I found, some things that I found quite interesting, and hopefully it also generates some good discussion. And then when I was thinking of relating this to the responsible AI, so what I was thinking is that responsible AI is often quite rich in principles, but often a bit thin on the moral vision. So we have fairness metrics, transparency requirements, all sorts of frameworks that are procedural tools, but that don't really tell us what humans are for, or it's kind of what kind of society technology should serve. And what I find is that Catholic social teaching offers at least one example of what a thick moral tradition contributes to AI design by offering this vision of human dignity, community flourishing, etc., that can help manage the trade-offs responsible AI practitioners may face daily. So I'll be drawing on a study of Magisterium AI, which is a Catholic chatbot, where developers had to manage or balance between compassionate responsiveness to user queries, but also doctrinal fidelity. And hopefully this talk shows that encoding values into AI is not really a one-time thing or just an engineering task, but really this ongoing organizational accomplishment. And we'll finish off with the point that any serious responsible AI effort really needs something that at least most of the frameworks out there lack, which is an anthropology, and really understanding of what human beings are. So the way I'm thinking about this, or at least the thing that I'm quite concerned with, is what I started calling the great AI inversion. For example, one has to do with the inversion of work. When I was told, many years ago about AI and what it will do, I had this vision in mind where I'm, writing poetry or painting in my garden, and AI does all of the things for me. So AI was supposed to handle drudgery, so that we can pursue these creative, intellectual tasks and work and think about philosophy. But in the end, we have AI that composes songs, sonnets, it generates art. While humans in the global south spend 10-hour shifts labeling data, they moderate traumatic content for poverty wages. So we built AI to be better than our best while tolerating really the worst for those who make it possible. Another inversion that I'm quite concerned with is the inversion of judgment. AI was really supposed to be our aid, to gather information, to show us all of the options that we have, but instead we're delegating increasingly decision-making to algorithms, while we then task humans with the impossible job of explaining the decisions that they never actually made themselves. So just think of a customer service worker that becomes kind of a ventriloquist for a voice that they can't really fully hear. And another inversion is that of relationships. So when I think about AI, I often think about Star Trek, and you go somewhere to a different planet, different civilization, you tap something on your chest, and you can just communicate with anybody on any language. You can quickly understand what their customs are. You can build bridges among these civilizations. So the AI was really supposed to strengthen human connection by breaking down barriers. But what we got is chatbot companions that offer artificial intimacy to the lonely. We got recommendation algorithms that create echo chambers, and we got engagement metrics that are really driving most of the business models that are basically offering addiction that's dressed up as actual human connection. So we ended up interacting way more, but we could connect a lot less. And I think these inversions really reflect a poverty of vision about technology's proper relationship to human life. So we have plenty of principles, such as fairness and transparency and accountability. But I think what we lack is a coherent answer to a more fundamental question of both what the human beings are for, but also what kind of society should technology serve. And this is really a kind of a type of questions that people in this Catholic AI space are thinking a lot. And they're often then drawing on this Catholic social teaching. So Catholic social teaching, and it's nice because now we have Pope Leo XIV, and the Catholic social teaching started with the preceding Leo the 13th. And basically, Catholic social teaching has developed over as a response to the Industrial Revolution, and is now being sort of adapted and modified to the AI revolution, as they say. So I'll speak a bit about what this is and how people in the Catholic Church in particular think about these issues through this lens of Catholic social teaching. So Pope Leo XIV at one point said that every design choice expresses a vision of humanity. That was the title that I put on the first slide. And if that's true, and I think it is, then current design choices really express a vision where humans serve AI development, not the other way around. And Catholic social teaching might offer a different vision, one developed through these, 130 years of wrestling exactly with these questions since the first Industrial Revolution. But more importantly, what I'm seeing now is that these Catholic developers, they're able to translate these principles into surprisingly concrete design guidance or design choices. So I'll just quickly show kind of a couple of examples. So for example, the human dignity. So as I said in the previous slide, the Pope asks, the question is not merely what AI can do, but who we are becoming through the technologies we build. And this really shifts the entire framing of how we evaluate AI. So most AI evaluations asks, does it work? And is it fair? Is it accurate? But the formation questions, what habits, capacities, and relationships does this system cultivate or erode? That's really the important part that's often being missed by the usual questions that we ask. Every kind of interface pattern or every nudge that's incorporated in AI-based tools is really forming the people who use it. So, for example, when you build AI for industrial automation, are you designing systems that enhance worker judgments and skills, or that distill them into essentially button pushers that are then monitoring systems they can't really understand? So it's really a question of human dignity and where a human is placed in a whole assemblage of tools that are emerging. Then there's this principle of subsidiarity. So the principle of subsidiarity says that decisions should be made at the most local level capable of making them well. So what does this mean in AI terms? So for example, it can be translated as process data on users' devices, right, rather than servers, or train models across distributed systems. Keep institutional data under institutional control. So it's not really, so this is not really just about privacy, for example, but about who remains an agent and who becomes a resource to be extracted. Then I also put two more examples: preferential option for the poor. So if you want technology that generally serves everyone, you actually need to start from the margins, not start from the elite users. For example, you start by designing for low bandwidth connections, or for all older devices, multiple languages, and you start from accessibility from the start, not just an add-on to that you kind of put as a patch to just improve the final tool. And the universal destination of goods, it's essentially a principle that says, well, knowledge and tools should serve everybody. So, for example, open source models, open data sets. If public money funded the research, the public should access the results, etc. So, what I wanted just to sketch here by these principles of Catholic social teaching is that you don't have to be Catholic to agree with most of these, and you don't have to be Catholic to find these useful. So what I'm interested in my research, and I'm interested in more broadly, not just Catholic AI, but also more generally, how faith traditions can inform alternative ways of developing AI that actually promotes human flourishing. That's kind of the core question. Um, so, but and why is this important? Well, because faith traditions, and in this case, Catholic framing, it really adds coherence, because the principles that I mentioned before are not separate, and you can just pick and choose one. They really hang together as the vision of what human beings are. So, humans are creatures of dignity. They're made for community, and their flourishing requires freedom and solidarity. And having this kind of a coherent vision really matters, because responsible AI often involves managing trade-offs between different values and different design choices. And it's really hard to manage these trade-offs, right? For example, between transparency and privacy, right? Without knowing what you're actually aiming for. And I think faith traditions can really help us to think about this in a novel way. So to make this concrete, I mentioned some of the principles, but how do they actually work, and what happens when you try to build AI with this thick moral tradition in mind? So I spent, as I said, about 2 years now studying this question in the case of development of magisterium AI. So you can Google it, download the app, play around with it. It's essentially a Catholic chatbot designed to answer questions about church teaching, but with compassion. So what does that actually mean? So Magisterium AI, it's a LLM-based chatbot. So it's used by about 100 people. They have about 100,000 monthly users. And while some people might ask theological questions, and what does St. Thomas Aquinas say about hope? A lot of people say things like, I had a fight with my spouse, and what should I do? Or I have this recurring sin that I have a problem with, what should I do, etc. So the system, when answering these kind of questions, needs to be compassionate, and responsive to real human suffering, but also remain faithful to the church teaching. That's sort of the goal that developers have. And just to explain what this means, and why is this actually in a tension. So just imagine if somebody says, no, I have this recurring sin, and what should I do? So a lot of the chatbots out there that are sycophants, etc., will say something like, well, it doesn't matter, it'll all be fine. Maybe it'll say God will forgive you, etc. Right? But that's not really something that, for example, the Catholic Church would like to these chatbots to say, right? But also if it says, well, in this paragraph of the Catechism, it says if you kind of can shed recurrent sin, you're going to go to hell, right? Well, that's also not something that the Catholic Church would like the chatbots to say, because it shouldn't actually just blindly follow what the paragraphs say without actually offering any kind of compassion. So basically, there's this some kind of fundamental tension, at least in this particular case, between two values: this emotional responsiveness and the epistemic norms. And this really matters beyond Catholicism. So every responsible AI system faces similar tensions. So just imagine a medical AI that has to be empathetic, but also quite clinically accurate, right? So just imagine a case where somebody says even to a doctor, I don't know, I'm drinking 10 beers a day and I'm feeling bad, right? Well, if you say that to that person, well, you're doomed, you're not really helping them. But also if you say, well, it's all going to be all right, you're also not helping them. You kind of have to give them some kind of a tough love, and tough love in itself already contains the kind of the crux of this tension. So now, as I was studying, okay, so my research question was, so what did these developers do or try to do as they were trying to balance these two values. And I sort of observed their work as kind of developed through three phases. So in the phase one is something that we often hear people try to do, is sort of to engineer the problem away, right? So they really try to solve it just technically. So they put, for example, hard guardrails that block sensitive topics, right? So the goal was to have strict fidelity to sources, etc. So, but what happens is that the system became really doctrinally safe, right? So it was really when it would give an answer, it would just give um, uh, something that is undoubtedly true in a way, but it was very cold. Moreover, it refused to engage with the legitimate questions about sex, marriage, grief, etc. And users that were in real distress, they would ask a question, and they were either met with citations or abstractions, and even in 20 to 30% of the time, the legitimate queries were just blocked, right? Because that's what guardrails do, right? When there is a sensitive topic, you just refuse to answer. So the lesson here is that you can't really engineer values through just constraints. And that's what they figured out. So, a guardrail in this case can protect one value. So in this case, specifically fidelity to the teaching of the church. But as they were doing this, the guardrail systematically undermined another value, which was compassion or emotional responsiveness. So no, this engineering compassion is not really something that worked. So what they said is, well, okay, so we need a different kind of an approach. So they really built this sophisticated middleware. I know, for example, classifiers that could interpret the intent behind queries and then route them appropriately. They had these conduct rules embedded in system prompts for more flexible response generation, etc. And so this was a bit better, but it was still insufficient. So the system could now handle individual response as well. And that's kind of really a key point here, because what it didn't manage well is how the entire conversation unfolded. So really, this middleware was optimizing one response at a time, right? So as a response, they produced a response that was individually appropriate, right? But actually, what they realized is that's important is, well, how is this conversation actually developing over time, right? Because you can give kind of good responses one at a time, right? But what if the conversation doesn't actually help a person over time? And they really struggled with this, how to actually create something like this, because they realized, well, a value is not really a property of an individual output. Because when they're thinking about compassion and fidelity to the teaching, this really is a feature of the interaction over time between the chatbot and the person. So basically, they realized, oh, we can't actually evaluate, let's say responsible AI one response at a time. We will need to look at holistically. So then in a third phase, and this is the key finding, they developed what we call interactional scripts. So it's not only guidance for what the system should say, but also how the interaction actually unfolds over time. And in particular, they developed two types of scripts. One are in-looping scripts. So these are applied to the conversations. So they're about when and how to keep the user engaged, what sources to draw on, how much responsiveness to express, and when to walk through principles before applying them to someone's situation. Right? And this is something that chatbots kind of can usually do fairly well. But really, what was an important addition was these off-looping scripts. So off-looping scripts are about when to deliberately stop and say, I've reached the limits of what I can offer you, and here's where to find a human who can help you. Right? So basically, it's about how to produce a response that uh, kind of finishes a conversation, but not, as in the case of engineering compassion just by blocking, but more you want to have some kind of form of care embedded in it. So just to give you an example, if you are how scripting works, if you say, well, I had a fight with my spouse and we have these problems, etc. What should ideally the chatbot do? Well, it should ask you questions to reflect on what happened, why, and how. But really, whether the chatbot successfully kind of achieved this mission is not, you cannot see it by just looking at one response at a time. Instead, it's about whether or not, at one point, the chatbot can say, I think now you're ready to actually have a conversation with your spouse because now you've reflected on it. You know what to say, you know kind of what problems you might have. And that's the next thing that you should do, right? So basically, a good chatbot as an outcome should have that a person doesn't need the chatbot anymore. And that's kind of the frame of mind that the developers of Magisterium AI had in mind. And these scripts, they weren't written just once, right? So they emerged really through an ongoing cycle. So basically what the developers did, they started monitoring conversations for breakdowns. They had a dashboard also to help them do so. And then whenever they would see a breakdown in a conversation, they escalated these cases to their scholarly advisory boards, consisted of priests and theologians, who then deliberated on what the right trajectory of interaction should look like. And then they would encode those judgments back into the system. So by revising prompts, sources, routing, etc. So you can see really that it's not that these scripts were just another form of engineering compassion, but they really realized, oh, we actually need to have a compassionate AI chatbot. We need also, to be organized for compassion more broadly, right? We need some kind of humans in the loop, if you will, to ensure that that the chatbot can adapt to new kind of situations where compassion is needed. And I think this quote from an advisory board member, so one of the priests, really kind of sums up what the goal of the chatbot is. So when he says, people don't just want information, something different happens and you want to connect. You want what's called church, you want community. So they realized, well, this is actually the main aim that this chatbot should be doing. And this was quite interesting for me. And when I reflected on everything that these developers did, and especially when thinking of relation to responsible AI, so these are the three lessons that I really wanted to highlight. So first is that values can't be encoded once and forgotten. Right? They really require ongoing organizational work of this monitoring, deliberating, revising. And any responsible AI framework that treats values as these design time specifications might actually fail in practice because it can be adapted to specific situations people encounter. But also compassion, but also I would generalize this to values more broadly, is really an organizational accomplishment. So you can't make you can't embed values in an AI system by just tuning them. So in this case, you can't make an AI system compassionate by tuning its emotional responsiveness. Right? So what you can do is create organizational arrangements that produce this compassionate interaction over time. So I would argue this is the same true for fairness, for safety, or for any other value we care about. And also, we really need to work hard on knowing when to stop. Right? So when a chatbot should actually stop chatting. So the most important thing the developers behind Magisterium AI learned was how to design systems that can recognize when it's time to actually hand off the user to other humans. So I think when we think about responsible AI, we spend enormous energy on what systems should do, but I'm not sure whether we spend enough time or energy on designing boundaries on and basically designing or teaching systems when not to act. Um, so no, I want to draw this, and this is kind of drawing to a close, three provocations for responsible AI research. So one is that um, responsible AI needs really anthropology. So we can have, and a lot of major tech companies have real wonderful lists that are very much important for responsible AI. So I'm thinking here of fairness, reliability, privacy, transparency, sustainability, accountability. But we need to know what to do when they conflict. Right? So when fairness and reliability, for example, pull in different directions, or I mentioned already this tension between transparency and privacy. It's very hard to actually have both. So to manage these conflicts, we need something underneath these principles that can actually guide us in how we manage the tensions between them or manage the trade-offs. And that's really a vision of what human beings are and what we need to flourish and what kind of society we want for us or for ourselves. So Catholic social teaching provides one such vision. There are others from other religious traditions, from also secular humanism, from indigenous knowledge systems, etc. Um, and the point is not that everybody should adopt Catholic teaching. The point is more broader, is that this thin procedural ethics can't do the work of these thick moral visions that these traditions can offer us. Um, the second provocation is to design for formation, not just the function, right? So design for making humans in a particular way, to grow in virtue, if you will, not just to chat. So the most radical thing that Catholic social teaching contributes to AI discourse is not the question of, is the formation question. So not does this system work, but what kind of people are we becoming through building and using these AI systems. So I'm not sure how much current responsible AI frameworks actually deal with the second part of the question, or the second question. But I would argue it's really an important one. So when you build an AI system that makes decisions for people, you're not just automating tasks, and then it's, oh, are we automating, augmenting? But we are already shaping whether how these people are developing their capacity for judgment, for thinking, etc. The same thing is when systems provide artificial companionships. So we're really shaping whether people invest in the harder, richer work of human relationships when we do this. So every system and every design choice teaches people what to expect and what to value, and what things to outsource. The third provocation is that we should build organizational infrastructure for ongoing value work. So the case of magisterium AI shows that responsible AI is not solely a design time activity. And I think many of you here already know this, that it's an ongoing organizational practice. So if you're serious about it, you need monitoring systems that surface value tensions. You need deliberative bodies that include not just engineers, but also people with relevant moral expertise. You need processes for revising system behavior as you learn from deployment, etc. Also clear mechanisms for knowing when to hand off to humans. So this can be harder and less glamorous than just building better models. But I think it's really the crux of responsible AI. So this is probably my favorite quote from Pope Leo, that technological innovation can be a form of participating in the divine act of creation. Um, so you don't have to share his theology to really appreciate the weight of that claim. So the systems we build really do shape who human beings become, and I believe they do, then the work of building them responsibly isn't just a professional obligation of AI developers. So it's really one of the most consequential things any of us will do, given the proliferation of these systems. So just the question is whether we have the moral vision to match the technical ambition that we have.